Good evening. Welcome to this edition of On Deck with Mercury. My name is Mercury Payton. I'm the town manager of Vienna. And one of our greatest strengths in our community here in Vienna is the level of engagement that we enjoy with the residents who live here in the town of Vienna. Our town residents have a long history of communicating with the town council, with staff, being very active, a lot of volunteerism. And so what's important to us as staff and as the leadership with the town is hearing from our residents. That's very important and key to us. So joining me here today at Patrick Henry Library is to my right, Melanie Clark. She's our town clerk. Hello, Melanie.
Hello.
And to my left is Steve Brillia. He's the town attorney.
Good evening, Mercury.
And Karen Thayer is our public information officer.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us here tonight. So we're going to talk at the very beginning here about public information and how citizens and residents can make their voices known to local government here. And so Karen's our newest member of our team. Really excited to have you here with us. You do a really excellent job in making sure that the residents hear our message and hear it in a very clear and succinct way. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've made over the few months that you've been here.
Well, I've been here, I guess, a little more than 5 months now. And so the first thing that I did was take a look at what we were already doing, because if we're doing something really well, there's no reason to change it. And what I found was that there were some really wonderful things with respect to public information that were already going on. So we made some tweaks. We adjusted them a little bit. Social media, for example, I noticed that we were doing a lot of announcements about public hearings and that sort of thing, which are important. That's important to communicate to the public, but I think it's also important to communicate some of the great things that are going on in town and to communicate things that resonate with people and get to the heart of who we are as a community. Things like the baseball championship that took place, the Little League Baseball Championship earlier this year. People loved that. Today we did something on Santa's Ride, and people loved that. And so we want to engage with our community a little bit more on that level. And we'll continue to take a look at our social media presence and see how we can enhance that. The Vienna Voice newsletter is also a little bit more visual now. We're using more pictures. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that because we feel like the pictures themselves tell a story. And so we want to engage with people in that way. We have an e-newsletter called Vienna Happenings, which goes out weekly. And Desiree Tufano has taken that over, and she's made that much more visual. And it seems to be resonating with the community because more and more people are opening the email. So it's nice to know that those messages about what's going on in town for the week are getting out. Most people should have the town calendar by now. We made some adjustments to that to try to make that a little bit more visual and to clarify some of the messaging in that. And it's a wonderful resource for people, particularly in the back, because you can quickly find contact information for council members, for example, or contact phone numbers for various town offices. And we'll continue to take a look at that in the spirit of continuous improvement. We're also engaging with some of our strategic partners because we all make up the town, and I think it's important that we work together to share news about common interests. So the libraries have some great programming. We have a new video director producer, Sean Metzger, who's behind the camera tonight. And we envision once things get back to normal here at the library that he'll be here recording some of the programs that go on that will repurpose for our cable station and come up with some more original content. And so he's also working with our economic development manager to help support the business community here by doing a number of spots, public service announcements about the kinds of things you can find in town, because we know that a strong community is directly tied to a strong economy in the community. And so those are just some of the things that we're looking at now. We have a vacancy in our office, communication specialist, and we expect when that position is filled, we'll start seeing some more changes very quickly. One that we are aware of is the town website. I think it's an improvement over what used to be there, but we agree with the kind of feedback that we're getting that it's sometimes not the most intuitive design. So we're going to be making some adjustments there, and hopefully that will become more efficient.
Well, thanks for sharing that update. And that's kind of the creative side of what you do. But there's also the business side and the aspect of partnership. And I like regionalism, and our team does a lot of that. And you've worked with Fairfax County to bring a little bit more regionalism and partnership with what you do. Tell us a little bit about the partnership that you kind of brokered with the print shop.
The Fairfax County Government Print Shop. I have a little bit of experience working with those folks from a previous job that I have. And what we're able to do by doing most of our printing through the county government print shop is we reduce costs. So we're better stewards of our taxpayer resources because the government entity is almost always going to be able to offer us a much more competitive rate than a commercial entity. They don't have the kinds of overhead that a commercial printer does. But what they also bring to the table is an expertise in the print realm that none of us here in the town government have. So when they don't have a solution for us and the job needs to be bid, they have the background and the expertise to negotiate the most fair price, I guess. They'll manage the printing, and they're in the best position to negotiate a resolution if something doesn't go as planned. What it also does is it frees up our staff time. The people who are, for example, in Parks and Recreation, you have the programmers. They're best at programming classes and camps and things like that. They're not print shop experts. They're not printing experts. So no longer are they going to be bidding jobs. We're going to let the people who have the expertise in the county government print shop bid those jobs. And we free up more time so we can program events and activities and things for our residents. So that's what we're always trying to do we want to be good stewards of our taxpayer resources, definitely, but we also want to work as efficiently as possible. And I think this is one example of how we can look for those strategic partnerships and do things better.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Steve and I talk a lot, just, walking down the halls about the fact that we're Fairfax County residents too. We pay Fairfax County taxes as well. And so this is just yet another example of how our taxes that go toward Fairfax County also kind of help with the residents of Vienna too. So I really appreciate you taking leadership on that. That's very helpful. Tell us a little bit about Freedom of Information Act requests. I know you get those, and I know that Melanie and Steve and others, the directors, all kind of weigh in. Tell us a little bit about that, Karen, about your role with the Freedom of Information Act requests we get.
Okay, so on the website, I am listed as the Freedom of Information Act officer, the FOIA officer. So anytime somebody wants information from the town that's a public record or what they think is a public record, they contact me formally through email usually. And if it's something as simple as council meeting minutes, I'll talk to Melanie. Those are pretty straightforward. They are public records. There's no reason that they have to be reviewed. And Melanie, you've got processes you have to go through to obtain those records. And then if it's something that might have some legal ramifications, or if I'm not real sure, if it's kind of in a gray area, then we call on Steve to give us some legal advice, and he will tell us, yes, this is in the public realm, or no, this is not in the public realm. And you can probably explain better than I can what kinds of documents would not be considered public records or open.
Sure. We start on the premise that all records are open to the public, and the way the Virginia FOIA Act is written is there's a presumption that they're all public. But there are certain important categories of documents for obvious reasons that are not public. Certain employee records, health records relating to employment matters, those are obviously private, just like they would be in the private sector. Victim information, that's part of active police investigations. You would, of course, consider that to be things that shouldn't be out in the public realm. What they call personal identifiers, social security numbers that are required to be given for certain reasons for payment of taxes. Those are confidential and are not subject to FOIA requests. But most documents that people would think they want to look at are available for the public. If there's a big rezoning going on, project documents that are submitted by a developer, they're all public record. Contracts once they're let. Now, when we're receiving bids, they're not public record because the bids haven't been open, and there might be confidential information the bidders are submitting. But once the bids are awarded, they're all public, and you can see exactly what the town's spending And all the town salaries are of everybody that works for the town are all public. So there's really just a small, narrow category of items that aren't public. And when you think about it, they're the things you would, in life, you would say, oh, I wouldn't want that public if it was in my personal records. But everything relating to how we spend money is public. The budget obviously is all public every year, you know, and it's posted online, which, going to one of your things about availability of all these records, there's so much more available on the websites now that are already scanned in. All the town council minutes after they've been approved are posted online, so the public has tremendous access at their fingertips.
Right.
But if they don't want to utilize computer-based searches, which they don't have to, then they can come into town hall, they can write a letter, and it'll be processed in a very quick time. We're very proud of how fast we turn around requests for public records in the town.
You know, and I'll just add here that you put a lot of emphasis on the fact that this is public and is accessible to the residents, and I think that's an important point because we are here for the residents, and so all of the things that we do, except for the narrow aspect that you just mentioned, is for the public. You know, and so we work for the public. We're partners with the public. We're all one team, and so. You know, I think there may be some perception out there that, you know, sometimes some governments are not open and eager to share, but we are eager to share because it's public record. I mean, it's there for residents to know, you know, what their tax dollars are being spent on. I think it's very important. Efficient record keeping is critical, and Melanie Clark is our town clerk, and she's the official record keeper. So I may have records, the police chief may have records, the finance director may have records, but you're the official record keeper. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Mercury, I'm the official record keeper for council meeting minutes,
right.
all the agendas. I keep records of the MOUs that the town approves, any agreements, all of the little stuff.
Well, they're little stuff, but it's big too. It's very important.
It is the big
It's very
stuff.
important.
Yes.
Yeah, those are critical aspects of what we do. And I'm glad that you're on top of that because, you know, we can rely and just, you know, walk down the hall and just, you know, ask you about maybe a contract that in 2009 was between, you know, two parties, us and someone else.
Right.
And it's very, very easy for you to just kind of to go and get that information for us. And so we rely heavily on that. So we really appreciate all the work you do with that. Setting agendas involves public comment and public hearings. What's the difference between public comment and public hearing?
Well, Mercury, what people get confused about, at council meetings, it's a council meeting. It's for council to discuss things that need to be approved, you know, policies, budget, things like that. And there are certain legal requirements we have for public hearings, for budgets, for code changes, anything like that. And that's when we allow public comment. For regular agenda items, we really don't allow public comment. At the beginning of the meeting, we have receipt of petitions and communications of the public, and that's where residents can bring issues to the town council, as long as it's not already on the agenda, and then they can discuss that. But really, the only time is during public hearings that we advertise.
Yeah, and this is an important point. I think maybe both Melanie and Steve both can chime in here. Residents come to a town council meeting, and they feel like they may want to speak about something. We go by something called Robert's Rules of Order, and so that kind of keeps the meeting with a certain structure that allows for there to be order with the meeting. So maybe talk a little bit about maybe the perception when someone comes in and they may say, oh, there's a agenda item number 1 is about water sewer line replacement. But they can't speak on that because it's an agenda item. Maybe talk a little bit about the perception that residents may have and then what the reality is and why that is.
Well, Mercury, it's a great question, and I think sometimes the public is confused about why the general public is allowed to come in and give comments on matters that are being considered by the town council, and other times they're not. Well, there's the first category that the town clerk mentioned is that there's certain public hearings that are statutorily required or required under our town code. And of course, we always have public hearings. People are used to seeing those. We have a public hearing on the budget every year and on the tax rate. Interestingly enough, you're required to have a public hearing on the water rate, but you're not required to have a public hearing on the sewer rate. And most people think they're the same. They're not. They're two separate systems. They have different needs and different lifetimes of use. But the council has decided for many years that those are all public hearings because it's a rate that people have an interest in. It affects their daily lives, and they want to hear the public comment on that, and they receive that every year. The sale of property, pretty important thing that can happen for a locality if you're selling property that's public property. It's required statutorily to have a public hearing and get the public input. Do you really want to sell that wharf? Do you really want to sell that piece of property? And so those are required statutorily, and when it occurs, that's what we get, as much public input as possible. There are other items when we amend our zoning ordinance. Again, a very important part of a local government's authority, and what we do here in the town of Vienna is our zoning authority. And so anytime there's a change in the situation where you amend the zoning ordinance in the town, there's actually multiple public hearings. A public hearing before the Planning Commission gives a recommendation, receives that input from the public. The Planning Commission, which is made up of residents, they're volunteers. So, I mean, you could argue that's a form of public comment right there, statutorily required under the town code. So the planning commissioners, the members of the public, give their input, and there's a recommendation from the Planning Commission, amend or don't amend a zoning ordinance. Comes to the town council. Town council holds a public hearing and then votes on that as they're required to do, up or down, and they can either amend or not amend our zoning ordinance. And that's a process that happens more frequently than people think. Sometimes we get public comment, as you know, and sometimes the public hearing is opened and closed and nobody comes to speak, but the opportunity is there. And then there's situations where it could be, say, when a council's considering a contract to buy a new trash truck. That's a big part of the town's job, what we do, picking up people's trash. It's a valuable service. That generally would not have a public comment or public hearing attached to it. It's something that we're going to do. It's a policy. It's in our code that we collect the trash. It's a ministerial, administrative function that the council has to come. The town staff does not have authority to buy a $200,000 trash truck. They're very expensive. So the purchase of such a large item would have to come before the town council. And sometimes they come in a block of trucks and vehicle purchase, but they always do come before the town council. But there isn't a public hearing on that, and it's not statutorily required. In theory, the council could say, we want to get the public's input. Do we need more trash trucks, or should we just run these into the ground, and if the trash takes a little bit longer to pick up, they could hold a public hearing on that if they want. It's not statutorily required, and there are areas in our code or by practice where the council does set things out for public comment. And our Code Create currently is a lot of public input built into it above the statutory requirement. There's already been a lot of public comment received on the Code Create project as a good example of getting as much public input early on as you can. And the form of the public comment can be informal at like a lowercase town hall meeting, which we've started to have, and they're very popular. They're not as intimidating as a formal public hearing, but it's a good way to get some baseline comments from the public. But the formal public hearings that are statutorily required, there's a record kept of those, and they're on, you generally at a formal council meeting, always at a formal council meeting. And one of the things that comes up is, why are they limited to 3 minutes? And that's our current practice. That's a common amount of time that many boards of supervisors, town councils, and commissions will use. I think there's probably a misconception under what the comment period of a public hearing is for the general public. Under Robert's rules, it's not a time for question and answer. And the town follows Robert's rules. It's in our town code. And most boards and commissions follow Robert's rules statutorily or by adopted practice. And what it is intended is, tell us what you think about this. We're going to discuss among ourselves, as Robert's rules you say, a motion's made and there's discussion among the board members. But we want to hear your comment. Are you for it or against it, and why are you for it or against it? Some members of the public think it's a time when they can debate. with an individual council member. Under Robert's rules, that's always out of order. You don't address comments directly to one member. You always direct your comments to the board. And you do it, and I do it occasionally. When the mayor asks a question or individual council member asks a question to the town manager, town attorney, the town clerk, we always address the entire council. Mayor, members of council is how we'll respond, because under Robert's rules, the response goes to the entire board because they make a collective decision. So if you think about when you're testifying that you're giving your thoughts, your opinion, your comments to the entire board so they know, and then you want to say your piece and then sit down, and they're going to consider it along with all the other comments. That's really the purpose of the public comment at public hearings. And some people get confused by that.
And there are processes too. So if somebody wants to make a public comment, Melanie, you have to, why don't you describe what the process is?
Well, usually when we have a public hearing, especially if we expect a large group, we'll have a sign-up sheet. People can come in and sign up, and then the mayor will call them. Sometimes it's a small public hearing, so they can just raise their hand, and the mayor will call them up, and they can speak. If they can't attend the meeting, they can always email council their concerns. The agenda is put out the Tuesday before the actual meeting, so they have time to look at the agenda. If they have questions about something, they can email me, they can email the town council directly. There's a lot of ways to get your voice heard out there.
Right.
They can make calls, they can make appointments to talk to people one-on-one.
Right. And talk a little bit about, when we talk about public hearings, when we say that term, that's a formal term that requires advertisement. Right. So it's not like we say there's a public hearing and then just show up, but talk a little bit about the process of notifying the public in advance of a public hearing that comes up.
Sure. Well, most public hearings have to be advertised in a local newspaper. 2 consecutive weeks. They need to be advertised at least, it's at least 10 days prior to the actual public hearing. And that's what's required by us to do. If we don't advertise, then we don't have a legal public hearing.
Right. And that's an important point, because that way residents have an equal opportunity of understanding what the public hearing is, when it's going to take place.
Correct.
And so then they can plan accordingly to attend the public hearing and make their comment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important part of our democracy and in our
Sure.
participation of what we are as local government officials. So I think that's very helpful. Anything else you would like to add about public hearings versus a public comment, citizens' time?
Well, Mercury, the one thing that as an attorney I always emphasize with the public when they say, well, I didn't know about it. And that's a common complaint. I didn't know you all were going to be talking about that last Monday night. I didn't hear about it. And the town clerk mentioned our legal advertisements. Those are required by the Virginia Code. That's how we're required to give the notice. Also on our website, which has gotten tremendously better, there is a public engagement section. It lists the upcoming public hearings. So once people get familiar, that's where I can look to see things of interest. One of the most effective ways of people knowing what's going on, especially when it relates to zoning matters, is the yellow boards. And it is still a very simple method. Most jurisdictions use a notice board. It applies primarily to zoning action. So if something's going to happen at say one of the shopping centers, they're going to tear it down and they want to do some kind of conditional use, they need zoning approval, and there's going to be a public hearing, there's a big yellow board that's put on. And then on the yellow board, there's the sheet that says all the details. You have to stop and read it. But I would say when you see those yellow boards go up, that's very important. You should stop and read it and see what's going to go on if you have an interest in, and it's usually applies to zoning. And that's a very old-fashioned way of getting the word out. And so we struggle as a town of getting the word out. Right. And I'm going to go back to Code Create. One of the things when we talked about revamping and updating the town code, possibly doing it, the council hasn't made any final decisions, is getting as much input as possible and using methods that aren't the traditional advertising in a newspaper for 2 successive weeks in the newspaper of general circulation. Right. Sounds like a legal term, right? That's because it comes out of the state code. But that's not how people find out about it, unfortunately. We still have to do that, and the town clerk has to do those advertisements. But people are finding out about it on the web, in the newsletters that go out, social media, word of mouth, talking to your council members. What's going on? Oh, we're having a big meeting in a couple of weeks. You might want to come. that is traditionally in a small town how word gets out the best way, I would say. And we are working with the General Assembly to come up with better ways of getting notice out to the public so they know when they can come and give their comments. But again, as the clerk, as Melanie points out, our council is remarkably available. You can send them an old-fashioned letter with a stamp, emails. I know they read their emails because they forward them to us and say, "Can you all look into this?
This is true.
And figure out what's going on
Right,
here."
right.
So they really are open. They're your neighbors. I always tell people these are your neighbors. They volunteer their time on Monday nights and a lot of other nights to do this work. So if you've got something positive or negative you think should be addressed, let them know, and they'll pass it along to staff and try to get it done.
And in a small town like this, there is the possibility of checking into the council meeting, and you see the public hearing portion broadcast on our cable station. You can be sitting in your living room at home, and if you don't like what's being said, you can get in your car and go to town hall and be there in 5 minutes, and then sign up to make your voice heard and say what you're thinking. And that's the beauty. One of the wonderful things about living in a small community is we are small enough that you can get anywhere very, very quickly and get things done.
Yeah, it's very important. Communicating with the mayor is, I think, on a lot of people's minds. Melanie, I know that you set up a lot of the creative ways that the mayor has outreach. Maybe tell us about maybe 2 or 3 that you have. There's a mayor's walk and meet the mayor. Talk about some of those.
Sure. There's a Meet the Mayor. It's the first Friday of the month at 9 a.m. at different locations. We usually have that in the newsletter, I believe.
We have that in the
where we're
newsletter.
gonna be.
We try to get it out via social media.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
then
the newsletter's online also.
Yeah. And then she has the mayor's walk. So, feel free to come have a walk with the mayor and, tell her your concerns about things. She's pretty accessible. She has office hours at town hall pretty regularly. If anyone wants to meet with her, they can just give me a call and we can set up an appointment.
Yeah. That's really, I think, a lot of access, and we're always looking for even different ways, so creative ways to connect with residents. So at the end of the day, when we in a final analysis of all of it, residents do have an opportunity to communicate with staff, council, the mayor. We're here for residents. I think that's the overarching message and theme is we want to make sure that residents know that. And we're always thinking of creative ways to connect. I mean, a couple of years back, we weren't doing On Deck with Mercury.
Right.
I think it was Mayor DeRocco started the Mayor's Walk.
Mm-hmm.
We're always thinking of new ways that we can,
Yes.
connect and communicate with residents. So that's kind of the theme that we want to leave everyone with.
Right, Mercury. We're here for the residents.
Yeah.
And always open to
Always
new ideas
open.
and
Mhm.
suggestions.
Give
too.
us a call, stop by. We're accessible.
So any final thoughts? I guess I'll start with Melanie. We'll go this way. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with the residents?
No, just please feel free to give me a call if you want to meet with the mayor. Your voice can be heard. Just let us know.
Okay, great. Steve, anything that you'd like to?
I'll put a plug in for the Planning Commission. We're coming up on our review of the comprehensive plan. Most people don't understand the importance. It is the long-term guidelines of what you think the town community should be. Every 5 years, the Planning Commission is required to look at the comprehensive plan and make recommendations. There may be recommendations that everything's great and they don't have to do anything, but if you feel that the town's going in one way that you don't think it should, they hold public hearings. It's a very important time for the Planning Commission to come up with new ideas and concepts, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well on a long-term planning calendar, and they make a recommendation to the town council. It's very important because if you come up with some great idea and it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, it may be still a great idea, but amending your comprehensive plan requires a number of public hearings, which is why it's only done once every 5 years. So it's coming up in 2022. It's very important. The Planning Commission spends a lot of time on it, and they have they want public input, and there generally is some, but I've always been surprised how there's not more. And then you get some criticism. Why do we do certain things away? Like we've done it that way for the last 15, 20 years. We just reviewed it in the comprehensive plan. it's recommended that we keep doing it that way. Well, the comprehensive plan is an evolving document, and that's where I think the public maybe not really understanding how important that is. And so I always like to say, come to the comprehensive plan hearings, pay attention to it, read the document, the draft form before it's finalized.
That's great. Karen, anything that you'd like to leave us?
I would encourage people, if you have ideas, comments, complaints, call us and let us know. What I've told my staff over the years is we can't address a problem if we don't know it exists. So rather than complaining to your neighbors and everybody else, call the town government if you have an issue, and we will do our best to try to address it. By the same token, let us know what we're doing well so that we can continue to build on that and improve our services, and know that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I'll mention that we have a number of meetings. We have conference sessions, which are also called work sessions, and town council meetings and other types of meetings. If you're interested in something and you're not quite sure what the process is for you to communicate, just reach out to us in advance of that meeting and say, hey, I'd like to come to whatever that meeting is. What is the process to communicate and let my voice be known and expressed? And we will happily let everyone know in advance what the protocol is for that said gathering and meeting. And again, we're here for you. We're excited to do what we do. And I'd like to thank Melanie and Steve and Karen for joining me here this evening, and thank Patrick Henry Library staff for making all this possible. I hope everyone has an enjoyable holiday season, and again, reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.